Hello, and welcome to the Delusional Boyfriend Book Club. My name is Courtney, and I'll be your host. And today we're talking about June 2025's BL Manhwa of the Month for Book Club. It's Save the Dae by Wagyu, and it is on Legend. It's ongoing with 55 chapters. It's released every week on Sunday with a hiatus every fifth week. I initially was very worried for this story. I had help putting this calendar together from an old friend who I don't really talk to anymore, and this is one of their favorite stories. So going into this, it did make me think of them a lot, which made me sad. But I decided to just say, fuck it, get past that hurdle, read the story. And then I read the tags for this story, which really caught me off guard because there was two tags specifically that I never think should go together. And that's high school and uncensored. Now, I will tell you, just spoiler alert, right off the bat, that problem is solved really quickly in the story. There is a reason for that. And there are no minors being shown in a state of undress in this story. So with that all being said, I do want to jump right into it. Our tropes for this are going to be red flag, classmates, roommates, enemies to lovers, jealousy, toxic, obsessive, kind of everything you could want from a red flag story is in this story. There's BDSM, there's kink, there is crybabies, there is trauma, and all of that made for both a very heavy read and also a very entertaining read. So if you're interested in those tropes, then I'll give you a little spoiler-free breakdown if you haven't read this yet. And if it sounds interesting to you, then I do think you should go read it and come back and join us for the rest of the discussion. So as far as our spoiler-free breakdown goes, our characters are in high school. They're both super, super seniors. Both of them have had traumatic events in their past, which have held them back from graduation. And now they're both trying to get their high school diploma before they move on to work and to college. And I guess in Korea, there's not just like a GED. Maybe that's just not as popular as it is here for older students. So both of them elect to go back to school as adults, as a 20 and 21-year-old. They go back to high school. So we have our main character, Won Dae, who is from an orphanage and is experiencing a lot of bullying in his life. So he is held back from school and switches to a different school and is 2 years older than everybody in his current class. He is very small. He is very petite. He is very meek. And he's very kind. He's just a very nice person, and he has experienced a really hard life. And in school, people took advantage of that and picked on him for that. So he is going into this story and into his senior year with the mindset that people are going to treat him poorly, but he's going to make the best of the situation. On the other hand, we have his desk mate, Yoon Won, who has also been held back for different reasons. And he is very intimidating. He has a scar on his face. He's taller, he's buff, he's very hot. And both of them find themselves in the same class as desk mates, and immediately they're off on the wrong foot. They are bickering. Yoon Won, who is the older, scarier, more intimidating one, doesn't like that Won Dae doodles and is happy and carefree and joyful looking. So he does pick on him right off the bat, not knowing that he's already been bullied his entire life. So he's kind of just compounding that trauma, thinking that it's all lighthearted fun. As the story goes along, these two do go from enemies at the beginning to lovers. And without saying anything else that would spoil it, I will tell you that that trajectory is not a straight line. It is very jagged and full of toxicity. And when I say lovers, the love that's involved in that is very questionable. So, with that being said, if you're interested in those tropes and that spoiler-free summary, I do think you should go pick this up on Legend. There is 55 chapters. I think that it's 30 coins per chapter. It could be 40 though. So, do what you can. I know there's like some read for free options on Legend. You can earn like certain rewards for stories. So if you guys are looking for this, please go find it on the official platform. The artist, the author always deserves your support. So please read legally. With that being said, I'm going to jump into the full spoiler-filled breakdown. So when we meet our characters, we have Dae walking into his first day of school and flashing back to his previous bullying at his old school and kind of promising himself that he's going to make the best of the situation. And he's going to go in knowing that he is senior to the other students, even in his class, and that they owe him some respect as their elder. So in Korea, you have this very strict kind of hierarchy and seniority where people have to be respectful of those older than them. And oftentimes, if somebody is older than you, you'll use certain language to indicate respect for them. So Dae's kind of technique or his strategy going into senior year is to just let everybody know that he is 2 years older. He's their Hayoung, which is the name you would use for an older brother, and that he is glad to be their friend, but that they should respect him because he is their elder. When he gets to his desk, he tries this on the very intimidating and gorgeous Yoonwon, who is his desk mate. He says, "Hi, I'm Dae, and I am 2 years older than you. You can call me Hayoung. I hope that we can get along." And Yoonwon is not having it right off the bat. He is just kind of like scoffing at this guy. Okay, whatever, buddy, take a seat. He sits down, he starts yapping, and Yoonwon is not having it. He's like, "Shut up, quit your scribbling, quit your doodling. You're so annoying to me." Dae has no idea how they're going to survive if this is how they're getting off on their first foot on the first day. So after a couple days of this, he asks him to a cafe so that he can try to work this out. He's a really nice guy and he doesn't want this to go on and ruin his senior year. So he says, "Yoonwon, can I buy you a drink? Can I get you some snacks?" They sit down to talk it out. And Yoonwon actually thinks that this is kind of ballsy of him and it kind of admires that Dae, being as small and fragile as he looks, is willing to go bend over backwards to try to make amends with him. And Dae goes so far as to apologize and say, "I have no idea what I did wrong or what I've done to upset you so that you immediately dislike me. But I really hope we can be friends going forward. And I apologize for whatever I did. I know you don't like my doodling and you don't like my sketching. I'll try to keep that under control. I'll try not to yap so much, and I'll, respect your space as my desk mate if you'll do the same for me." Yoonwon takes that and runs with it and goes, "You know what? I will respect you as my Hayoung. As the older of the two of us, I'll respect you. And I'll go so far as to write a contract down." So he writes a contract, and it's very specifically worded to say that I will respect the Hayoung. The Hayoung can make any rules that they want to make, and I'll do whatever he says. And the only one who can amend this contract or make a new rule is the Hayoung. And then Yoonwon signs it and gives it to Dae. And Dae is like, "Oh, this seems very advantage to me. I get the better end of this stick. Of course I'm going to sign this." So he signs it, and they go forth as friends. Now, before they leave the cafe, Dae spills his drink all over himself and he gets wet. And Yoonwon goes, "Oh, let's go walk you to your house so that you can get a change of clothing." Dae is very afraid of that happening because he thinks if Yoonwon finds out that he's an orphan and he lives at an orphanage, everything they've just settled is going to be off the table, and he is going to use that vulnerability to make fun of him and pick on him. He says, "No, I can get home by myself. Don't you worry about it." And Yoon-won is like, okay, if you are going to get a cold because your shirt is wet and you have to walk all the way home, why don't you just come up to my apartment instead? And he's like, oh, okay, you live nearby? And Yoon-won is like, yeah, I live nearby. I live by myself and you can come borrow my clothing. So he takes him back to his house and he gives him his clothing. And then he asks him to just stay the night. And they do share a bed together. And that night, maybe because he got some water spilt on him, he feels a little bit sick. And so he kind of passes out. He has maybe a little bit of a fever, and he has this very dirty dream about Yoon-won. And in his dream, Yoon-won is kissing him and touching on him and sucking on him, and he wakes up horrified that he's had this dream and it was a wet dream. Meanwhile, us as the audience sees that when Won-dae passed out from that fever or the excitement of the day, whatever it was that had him falling asleep so quickly, Yoon-won took the opportunity to put some fever medicine in his mouth and then feed him water from his own mouth. So he is kissing on him while he's passed out, which is our first instance of non-con. And I know it's not that extreme, but I will say, trigger warning, this is the first of many incidences that Won-dae isn't exactly agreeing to or consenting to with his full chest. So from here, the boys go to school. He has gotten his clothes washed by Yoon-won. And when they get to school, Won-dae's only friend, his only friend that he has, shows up and is like, oh, who is this? Is this a classmate? Whatever. And Yoon-won is immediately very possessive of Won-dae and goes, who is that? Is that your friend? Does that make me your second friend? Am I your second best friend if you already knew this guy? And Won-dae is like, yeah, I mean, what's the problem with that? We're just friends, right? And we can see that Yoon-won is not having it, that he's decided to make Won-dae his toy and his friend, and he does not want to share with anybody. So at this point in the story, he calls that contract back up into question, and he grabs his ID and he shows Won-dae and he says, guess what? You're not the Hayoung in this contract. I've been older than you this whole time. I was also held back, and it turns out that I'm your senior. So you have to do whatever I say. You have to respect me, and I can add to the contract seeing as I am the Hayoung. Won-dae is completely besides himself. He feels tricked. He feels made fun of. He feels like this guy has been making a fool of him the whole time. So he gets really mad and he's like, I don't even want to be your friend. Let's call this whole thing quits. We just have to be each other's desk mates. There's nothing more to it than that. And throughout the story, this will happen where Won-dae kind of wants to push Yoon-won away because he can see that he's making fun of him, he's belittling him, but Yoon-won uses those opportunities where he's making fun of him to also endear himself and bring them closer. So when he does make fun of him, he's like, I'm only doing it because we're friends, which I know we've all been there in a toxic relationship where someone is bringing you down and acting like it's an inside joke. And this is really triggering for Won-dae because we find out that in his past, a kid at the orphanage who he grew up with was supposedly his best friend. While he's getting bullied at school, he's getting the shit kicked out of him every single Monday. His name, Won-dae, comes from being abandoned at the orphanage and having a note left with him that says, I hope you can give him a better life one day. So they name him Won-dae, which also in Korean means Monday. So the kids at his old school every Monday would kick the shit out of him and make fun of him, spit on him, traumatize him because his name was Monday and they thought that was lame and nerdy, whatever. So his best friend, who he had relied on his whole life, it turned out on this last time that he was getting the shit kicked out of him, they said, oh, don't you know that it's your best friend who's been putting us up to this? It was the kid from the orphanage who you hang out with all the time. He's the one who told us to pick on you. He's the mastermind of all of this. So Won-dae is really traumatized from that. He's come to this new school and he doesn't actually take that kindly to being made fun of and to having somebody trick him, pretend like they're his friend, and all the while having this ulterior motive. So the story goes kind of back and forth between Won-dae wanting to assert himself and stand up for himself, and also really wanting this friendship from Yoonwon. And Yoonwon knows that he has the upper hand because he knows this guy is an orphan. He has no money to his name, no family to his name, and he himself is in similar circumstances. We find out that his mother committed suicide and he blames himself very heavily for it. She was an artist and he accidentally broke her wrist when he fell out of a tree jumping into her arms, and she was never able to do art again. And after that, she stopped loving him and decided to end her own life. So he has this big trauma as well of being abandoned, and he thinks he can leverage what he knows about Won-dae against him in order to keep him around forever. He thinks if he's not my friend, if I own him like a pet, then he can never leave me like my mom left me. So he doesn't see what is so wrong with his own manipulation of Won-dae. He sees his manipulation as a guarantee that Won-dae will never leave him, that he'll never move on to other things, and that he'll never have to be alone. And we actually learn that this top, that Yoonwon, is actually a crybaby himself. He can't see horror movies. He really hates being alone. He's scared of ghosts. He's scared of his own dead mother. He says he had even considered, not living anymore on this earth, but the fear of seeing his mother in the afterlife kept him alive. So he has a very dismal life, and he has no problem projecting that onto Won-dae and using Won-dae in order to circumnavigate his own issues. So he's very much using and abusing this guy, and he offers him a place to live. And he says, if you don't want to live at the orphanage anymore, you can come live with me in my apartment, and you don't have to pay any expenses and you don't have to work. In fact, Won-dae has a part-time job when we meet him. And then he suddenly gets fired when he starts befriending Yoonwon. And his boss says, don't ask me why. And I can bet you, even though we haven't by chapter 55, we still don't know this for certain. But Yoonwon definitely made him get fired. He definitely contacted the guy who owned that convenience store and had him get fired so that he had nowhere to be, no income to make, and Yoonwon could have him all to himself. So he has him move in. He lives with him. All of his free time is spent with Yoonwon, and all of his belongings are owed to Yoonwon because he replaces his phone with a new phone, blocking any old contacts that he had and deleting any old friends that he might have had. And then he replaces all of his clothing with new clothing. And he didn't have much to begin with, but now everything that Won-dae owns is thanks to Yoonwon. And Yoonwon is, like I said, toggling between acting like they're actually friends and outrightly saying, you're my pet, I own you. So the dynamics are very toxic. They're very crazy. We have one person who is a traumatized orphan who is basically pure, good, innocent to the core and is determined to rise above his trauma and be better than it. And then we have our top who has been absolutely traumatized and has decided to be an evil, rotten person because of that and use people around him in order to make himself feel better instead of rising above his circumstances and actually being a good person. We also see that he's very rich and comes from some kind of crime family. We know that his mother was an artist, a very rich artist, but he has two brothers, and his two brothers are living in a mansion, and one of them is very sickly and small, but the other one has Yakuza tattoos. So we can see already that he has affiliations to some kind of gang and that he is affiliated with an underworld that Won Dae would have no idea about. Won Dae would have gone on to live his life as an ordinary, probably pretty impoverished blue collar man had he not ran into this guy. And this guy is offering him a meal ticket. And initially, Won Dae does see this for what it is and is like, I know that you expect me to pay you with my body because Yoon-won is very sexually aggressive. He's like, I know that you want me to have sex with you in order to live here for free. So he propositions him and says, okay, do you want me to blow you? What do you want me to do to earn my keep here? And Yoon-won rejects that and basically says, you don't owe me anything, just never leave. If you want to have sex with me because you want to have sex with me, then that's amazing. I want to do that. Of course, I've already kind of pressured you into it, so I'd like to keep that going. But that's not your payment for staying here. Your payment for staying here is never leaving my side. So as things progress, we obviously see that become very precarious when somebody, especially us as women, we know when somebody offers to provide for you, no strings attached, that is almost never the case. I am married to the guy I've been with for the last 10 years, and he's very much the provider in our relationship. And still there are moments where that feels like it's held above my head, like he's the breadwinner, and he never tries to make it feel like that. But if you're a conscientious woman, you know that at any point that man could cheat on you, could leave you. And then if you're living in his house or you're driving his car or you're on his phone bill or you're on his bank account, suddenly all of those things could be taken away from you and you would be left empty-handed trying to walk into a bank, trying to walk into a Verizon to sign up for a cell phone plan, to get a lease, any of these things with the record, your history having been that a man was the leaseholder and the account holder on all those things in the past. So you should, and what we're taught to do is keep all your own bank accounts, keep your own cell phone plan, have your car in your own name so that nobody can take those things away from you. And Won Dae falls victim so quickly to this. And later on in the stories, so we do get a lot of action in this story. It's completely uncensored, and we see these guys going at it kind of day and night. And while they're having all of this physical intimacy, they are growing emotionally more connected, which is a little bit inevitable when you are living with somebody, going to school every day with somebody, and having sex with them every day. You will become more connected to them. But Yoon-won is very reluctant to call this anything other than what it is, that they live together and they're by each other's sides always. But he does not want to call this love. He doesn't want to call it like. He doesn't want to call it a relationship because he feels like if he puts any label on that, it can be taken away from him, just like his mom was taken away from him. So as Won Dae is catching these feelings and starting to understand that he really does like this guy and he doesn't want it to be a transactional relationship. He doesn't want it to be a circumstantial relationship. He tries to put that forth and it is used against him. Yoon-won does say why do you need me to tell you that I like you? Why do you need me to call you my boyfriend when I've given you everything you could want? And Won Dae doesn't accept that. And he says, okay, if you don't like me and you're going to reject me when I've confessed to you that this isn't just a living situation for me, I don't want you to just be like a sugar daddy to me. I want to be your boyfriend. And you're telling me, no, that's not a possibility. Then I'll prove to you I don't need you. And even though you've given me this meal ticket, I can earn my own. So he packs up his shit and he goes and he gets a new apartment and he gets a new job and he tries to set back out on his own and set this boundary with Yoon-won that if he's nothing more to him than a lay, and if he's just being kept around to comfort this guy with no concern for who he is as a person or what the relationship is going to eventually end up being, then he doesn't need it. So he leaves, and Yoon Won cannot believe it. He thinks the next day that he's just going to come back, and he's a smoker, and you can see him literally chain smoking and drinking, and day after day Yoon Won does not come back. And so we see it's turning into his own birthday, Yoon Won's birthday, and he goes and approaches Won Dae and says, "Hey, I know you don't want to talk to me. I know you've cut us off from what we used to be, but it's my birthday. Do you think you could sing me the birthday song?" And Won Dae is so nice that he accepts this apology. And it's not even an apology. He accepts this weird olive branch. And he says, "Okay, my new apartment's right up there. It's just a studio, but you go on up. I will come meet you." So he runs off and he gets this guy a birthday cake. And he brings it back and he sings him happy birthday. And Yoon Won goes, "I know that the only reason you let me up here is because it's my birthday. And that's why I waited until today to confront you. But I want things to go back to the way they were." And Won Dae asks, "Are you returning my confession? Do you like me the way that I like you? Are you ready to be my boyfriend?" And Yoon Won is like, "No, I don't think any of that is necessary. But if you want me to say that you're my boyfriend, then you're my boyfriend. If you want me to say that I like you, then I like you. If you want me to say I love you, then I love you." And Won Dae is so horrified that those words have no meaning to Yoon Won. He himself, grown up an orphan and betrayed by his only friend in the whole world, he knows what it means to never have loved somebody, and yet he's not throwing the words around like they're meaningless. He wants to use those words with somebody he genuinely feels that way about. So he rejects him and he kicks him out and he says, "You know what? You just saying it is not the same as you meaning it. You telling me what I want to hear isn't the same as you loving me and caring for me the way that I care about you." And he stands his ground. And I will say that I really love this character. Like, Won Dae is so cute. First of all, the fucking chibi of him is so adorable. He's got these round little hands, and he's every time they're in like a sexual situation, he's such a crybaby. He cries all the time. And yet he finds himself being like a little bit slutty and promiscuous as he is finding his sexuality. He's finding that he does like this stuff, and he really likes Yoon Won. He likes their intimacy together, and he fully does think he's a good person and does have feelings for him. And he's able to recognize that in himself, admit that to the other person, and then stand his ground on what he thinks he deserves as a partner. And I love that in a character. I think that is so fucking cool. So I like initially with this story, I was so worried that these were high school characters. They were going to be really immature characters, that there was going to be a toxicity that I couldn't handle. And yet this character who is an adult is maturing along with the story and standing up for himself in a way that makes him extremely likable. And he's this like little cutie patootie with a little mole on his nose. He's very petite. So at this point in the story, I absolutely loved him. And at this point in the story, although I felt really bad for Yoon Won for having his mother die by suicide and blaming himself for that, I also started to just kind of want him to grow up. He's actually the older of the two. He's way bigger, he's way stronger, and yet he cannot admit his own feelings to himself. So we have this dynamic where he's really just trying to confront his own demons. And there also is a moment just a little bit earlier in this story where he finds out about Won Dae's bullies in his past. This is a huge plot line. And he goes and he beats the shit out of those bullies to the point where he almost kills them. And he recognizes in himself that he's capable of killing somebody, that he's capable of taking it that far and letting his emotions get that out of hand. So we know that he recognizes he has this work to do. It's just that he's not ready to do it yet. As the story goes on, we know that the one worst bully, the best friend that Won-dae thinks he had from childhood, who was really the ringleader of all of the bullies, we know that Yoon-won is going to catch up with that guy and is going to give him his just desserts. And we also know that that's not what Won-dae wants. He isn't going to want anybody killed on his behalf. In fact, all he wants to do is move forward. So after he rejects the advances of Yoon-won, they go back to school. They are acting like everything is normal. And then that bully does come back into the picture. And it turns out that he is debuting as an idol. So he has an image to protect, and people worried that people are going to find out that he was this bully back in the day to his own best friend. He goes to the high school that he's at, and he finds his new phone number and gets Won-dae to go out for a burger with him. And when Yoon-won sees this happening, he catches up to them and joins them for that burger. And he starts to connect the dots that this person who tormented Won-dae is now coming back into his life for what can only be nefarious reasons. And yet Won-dae doesn't want his help. He seems to like this old bully better than he even likes Yoon-won now. And there's nothing Yoon-won can do about it. So after they get that meal together, he can sense that this guy is going to bully him, but he doesn't know what to do. These two go off and the bullying kind of continues. Won-dae gets his hair ripped out by this guy. And meanwhile, Yoon-won is having this reckoning, trying to remember why it is he went back to school and why it is he is trying to graduate and turn a new leaf. And he remembers that about a year earlier, he had been drinking and doing drugs and had been in a really bad situation and passed out almost in an alley when a really nice soul came up to him and offered him a piece of cheesecake and a burger and said, I hope you find somewhere warm to sleep. Here is this food. I know it's not much of a meal, but please be safe out here. And that's when he starts to connect the dots, that the person who did that for him said he only bought cheesecake on his birthday, and that Won-dae had just bought him a cheesecake. And he suddenly realizes that the person who helped him out a year ago is the same guy that he's been using and manipulating. And that was his whole reason to turn over a new leaf. It was his whole reason for this second wind in life where he wasn't just going to give up. So Yoon-won starts racing. When he makes this realization, he starts racing to Won-dae. And Won-dae is exhausted from the events of these few days and from meeting his bully. And he actually is walking up to his studio apartment and passes out down the stairs. And as Yoon-won is connecting the dots that the guy he has been hooking up with is also the savior that he could barely remember from his blacked out state a year ago, and that he needs to salvage this relationship because they are destined. He realizes now that it's not an accident they've been brought together, and he wasn't just using this guy as a convenience, but that they are destined to be together and they belong together. And he's going to prove it to Won-dae. So he's running to him, and as he gets to his apartment, he sees ambulance lights, and then he sees a stretcher, and then he hears somebody talking about a suicide. And he starts to have a complete emotional breakdown as he sees Won-dae wheeled out on a stretcher. So he runs to him. He jumps in the ambulance. He says that he's his guardian, and he gets in the ambulance with him. And then he himself starts to pass out. And the ambulance guy tries to give him a paper bag to help bring him back. But he passes out. And when he wakes up, he's in a hospital bed. And Won-dae is beside him. And he's like, oh my God, Won-dae, you're okay? Are you you have no idea how worried I was about you. And Won-dae goes, I just fell down my stairs. I actually landed on my backpack, so I have no injury, but you completely passed out. You hurt yourself. Are you sure you're okay? And this had happened once earlier in the story when Won-dae learned that Yoon-won couldn't go to scary movies. He tried to play a trick on him and be the funny prankster. For once, he was going to have the upper hand. So he takes him to a horror movie. And then Yoon-won fully has a mental breakdown, has a panic attack. And one day is like, what happened? And that's when he realizes that Yoon-won's whole backstory of his mom dying started out with him being scared of a scary movie and then climbing a tree and his mom asking him to get down and saying ghosts aren't real. So he jumps into his mom's arm and breaks her arm. And that's why her depression started and eventually how she ended up taking her own life. So Won-dae is very highly alert, like aware of this fear and this phobia. So when Yoon-won wakes up in the hospital, he's like, are you sure you're okay? I know what you've been through. And even though we're not friends anymore, I am worried about you. And Yoon-won is like, forget all of that. Please, just hear me out. I know I was passed out a second ago, but I was on my way to tell you. You're my destiny. I care about you. I want to be together. I like you. I want you to be my boyfriend for all of the right reasons because I love you as a person. And Won-dae is just kind of like, I better let you sober up. Like, I better let you come to your senses before I accept that. But let's go home together. At least the very least we can do is just go home and try to let the storm settle. And then I'll see how you really feel after that. And that's chapter 55, where we end off. So I know that this story is on season 2 and it's probably going to get a 3rd season. So I'm really excited to see where it goes. Throughout this story, we hear Yoon-won being very anxious about them going to college and saying he will pay for Won-dae's college as long as he goes to the same college as him and never leaves his side. So he's trying to control his future as well. And I do hope my predictions for this story are that we get to see the graduation and maybe hopefully in some side stories get to see them at college together, or maybe season 3 will be set at college. I also predict that the gangster side of Yoon-won's family is going to come strongly into play, and we're going to get a lot more action on that side, especially with him having now met the main bully of Won-dae's life and having this goal in his mind to eliminate that threat. So I think we're going to get the main bully, Won-dae's main bully. I think we're going to get his murder or his elimination either way. Also, it's been hinted at that he is coming out and debuting as a K-pop idol. And we can see that there's a connection to Yoon-won's family's businesses. So they're in the entertainment industry. They also seem to own a lot of stores. So if they get the news out that this guy has been a bully in the past, they can mar his reputation and keep him from being a K-pop idol, which would be a much preferred ending in solution to our problem than full on killing this guy. But I will say Yoon-won is very hot and very hot tempered. And we've watched him take off his wristwatch and use it as brass knuckles to beat up a lesser bully. So I cannot imagine what's going to happen with this other guy. I will say that like highlights of this story are the kink play, and it's hard because there is some non-con going on here, and there is some like sadism going on here and some dominant play that's not specified or lined out ever. We just see that that's how their intimacy plays out. So in their first sexual interaction with each other, we see Yoon-won not only going all the way with Won-dae, but also putting ice cubes up him. And Won-dae is like begging him to stop. And he's just savoring the crying and the begging and the, pain mixed with pleasure. And this sadism is really coming out of Yoon-won. And in the author's note, the author says that he will eventually feel bad for this, for spanking him and punishing him, that Yoon-won will eventually feel bad for doing that to Won-dae. But we also see Won-dae kind of start to enjoy all of this stuff. And he is very naturally like submissive and breedable. And they've got a scene where with a dildo on a washing machine that's very forceful, very hot. We've also got a scene with a full-on like kitten outfit, and it includes a tail and a butt plug, and the top insists that they can fit both that toy in there as well as himself and his own member. And he is huge. The art, it's uncensored, and I will tell you that it's very like red and pointy, but it's pretty. Like, I will say it's pretty. It's cute. Like, it's not the most gruesome uncensored peen I've ever seen in my life. It is nice to look at, but they've got these moments of intense kink. We've got like a fountain scene where Dae has been going all night and begs to stop. He's like, I'm going to pee my pants. And Won goes, nobody's stopping you. Go ahead. And after he does, like, squirt all over the place, then he's like, oh, look at you peeing with your leg up in the air like a dog. And then he taunts him and calls him a doggy and says, oh, let me know if you have to go wee wee doggy, and uses this against him, even though he basically forced the situation. So there is this BDSM dynamic that's very, very unhealthy, where we have kind of no outlined boundaries and we don't have a sense of trust. In fact, we've got a sense that Dae will let Won get away with murder. And it's not that he trusts him, it's just that he doesn't really know how else to function in this kind of relationship, because this is the first person he's ever been intimate with. So I really loved the sex scenes. I thought they were really like kinky and good and fun, but also there's a ton wrong with them. It's very triggering content. It's very toxic content. But if you're listening to this podcast, everyone is entitled to their own yums, and I'll never yuck anybody's yum. And I will say that this kind of like non-con or consent, non-consent, or these toxic dynamics, they're ones I do enjoy in a story. And I will say that I have to like sprinkle in those stories amongst some fluffier stories, but it does have a certain appeal. This drama, the toxicity, the dynamics, the chaos of it all has an entertaining appeal to it. If every story was black and white, green flag, like perfect, wholesome, fluffy boundaries, and we set out our dynamics at the beginning and our safe words at the beginning, and nobody ever disobeyed them, these stories would all be the same and they'd be really boring. And it's also just not representative of real life, where these relationships and these dynamics are intricate, and oftentimes they get fucked up, and oftentimes people do move past boundaries and break trust, and then that trust has to be regained and relearned, and boundaries have to be reset and reestablished, and sometimes old boundaries are no longer necessary, or new boundaries are now necessary because of interactions we've had with each other. So I think that, all of that being said, I appreciate those dynamics in this story. And after having had some more wholesome stories this month, like our anime was Twilight Out of Focus, and our manga was How My Daddies Became Mates. So wholesome, so fluffy. So I was ready for the spice and the toxicity in this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it too, and I hope that I didn't scar anybody or traumatize anybody for life by putting this on the calendar. And with that being said, that's like kind of wraps up our whole story. I cannot wait for the season to go on. I cannot wait to get more of this story and see what happens and the dynamics. Will Dae take him back? Will Won end up murdering that bully? Will the older hot brother with the Yakuza tattoo get his own love story? So I hope you guys will keep reading along with me. I'll definitely do updates on the socials. Maybe I'll do another update podcast in the future. Who knows, as the story gets released. But with that, I want to wrap up and enter into our delusional boyfriend area. My favorite segment of the show, this is what it's all about, is picking who we're going to obsess over from this story. And it would be very easy for me to say that Won is my delusional boyfriend, because He's all the things I love. He's possessive. He's jealous. He's toxic. He's got a huge dick. He's buff. He has a hot scar on his face. I love everything about him. But I will say that his immaturity and not being able to admit that he loves somebody and not being able to recognize that he loves somebody, it definitely takes him down a peg for me. And from this story, my delusional boyfriend, and it's not one day. One day I respect him for who he is, but I'm definitely that's not my boyfriend. That's like my bestie. I love him. I would kill for him. But my boyfriend in this story, I already know, is the older brother with the Yakuza tattoo. He is everything. Don't let that be a cop out. It's not a cop out. I just know what I like. And what I like is this kind of like Naname figure who is both a badass and a businessman and responsible and mature, but also clearly very dangerous. And I cannot wait to see what happens with that character. The author's already said that he's probably going to get his own story. So I really want to see where that goes. My only concern with him is that the littlest brother, who seems to be like 17 or 18, he was sitting on his lap at one point, and I just hope to fucking Jesus, I pray that there is no weirdness between the two brothers. Please, Lord, don't let that get weird. But I will say that that older brother has interfered several times, and in order to help Yoon-won, he keeps him set on the more straight and narrow. And it also seems like he's the successor to all of the money. So he's the real money bags and he's the real boss. And he's definitely my boyfriend from this story. I would love to know who your guys' boyfriend is. Do you agree with me? Like, does he have the potential to take it all? Or is Yoon-won being the like typical hot top, your boyfriend? Or did you love Won Dae? And like, that is the way that he stands up for himself and is eternally optimistic and cute as shit. Does that make him your boyfriend? So please comment if you're on like the podcast or YouTube, leave me a comment. I want to know who your boyfriend is. And then as far as this compares to my other delusional boyfriends in Manhwa, obviously the brother I don't know enough about yet for him to beat any of my other delusional boyfriends out. My other delusional boyfriends being like Hey Bomb and Boom and fucking like Aw Juicy. Like, no, like this character is not fleshed out enough yet. All of these characters are so fucking messy that they don't like provide for me the security I need for them to be number one boyfriend from this story. And would I date my delusional boyfriend from this story in real life? Yes. Like, oh my God, yes. The older brother, he's got like the tats, but he wears the suit. So I could just pretend that all of his business is above board. I could just reap the benefits of whatever industry he's in, and I would live in his mansion and I would take care of the brothers. I would love to date him IRL. He seems perfect, but then again, we don't know much about him. So that being said, the delusional boyfriend segment is over, and all I have left is a little wrap up for you guys. If you're listening, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe either on YouTube or on the podcast channel that you're listening on. Thank you so much for being here for this journey. It is so fun for me to be able to sit down and do this podcast. It helps me, my ADHD, it helps it so much knowing that I have a calendar I can follow, and then also that I have time to read something and binge it and then digest it and talk about it and yap about it. And then knowing I have something next on the calendar helps me move on so that I don't become fixated forever like I am wont to do. If I'm allowed to just like wallow and sit in a story, I would never read another story. So it's really fun having you guys and this podcast like motivate me to keep reading and keep writing and, you know, keep sharing these stories with everybody and not get stuck in a rut. And that's just all thanks to you guys for listening. So I just want to say thank you so, so much. And if you aren't following us on socials, please do. We're at Delusional Boyfriend Book Club or Delusional BF Book Club everywhere on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. We're the most active, and it's so appreciative if you guys would go follow us there as well. It's really fun time just posting silly little memes and then keeping you up to date as I read these stories and watch these animes. You can see my in real time reaction. So please go follow us there. And until next time, remember, sometimes the delusion is the solution. Bye.